Today's Tuesday, September 9th, and it is 9:14 a.m. on that clock, 9:15 on that clock. The meeting's called to order. I'm Felicia Marcus, Chair of the Board. To my left is Vice Chair Fran Spivey Weber. To her left, Board Member Didi Diadamo. To my right, Board Member Tam Dodak. And to her right, Board Member Stephen Moore. Mr. Howard.
Thank you. To my right, Chief Deputies John Bishop and Karen Turgovich. To my left, Assistant Chief Counsel Phil Wiles. And assisting the board today are Janine Townsend and Courtney Davis.
Terrific. Emergency evacuation procedure for those of you who aren't familiar with this building. If you hear an emergency evacuation sounding noise, that's what it is. Find the exit nearest you. Take your stuff. We meet in Cesar Chavez Park, kind of on this side of the park to the left, down towards the Citizen Hotel. If you want to meet with us, you'll know when the all clear comes and it's time to come back. The meeting's being webcast and recorded, and that requires a couple things. One is, please take your phones and put them on stun or off so that you don't make noise, because that's very distracting to the speakers and on the webcast as well. And when you do come up to speak at the microphone, it requires that you speak very close to the microphone to be heard, even if we can hear you, which is nice. The folks on the webcast and sometimes the folks in the back of the room won't necessarily be able to hear you. And so just in the interest of everybody being able to understand what's going on, please go ahead and try and speak close to the microphone. It is harder than you might think to do. All right, we've got that. With that, we're on to the public forum, and the public forum is the section of the meeting where we hear from anyone who has something to say that is not already scheduled on the agenda, and we do give people a few minutes to put items before us. Do we have any cards? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to the board business. The minutes from August 19th. I know there's an amended version of the minutes out this morning.
Thank you, Ms. Townsend, for making those changes. And with that, I will move for adoption of the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposition? I didn't hear any. Okay, the minutes are adopted. Board reports. I'm going to start at the right today.
Okie doke. Thank you, Chair Marcus. The last few weeks have been busy. I'm sure they have for lots of folks here. I'll highlight a couple of things that I participated in. There was an event on August 20th in Salinas, California, held by the Farm Food Safety Conservation Network. Our staff, Johnny Gonzalez, was the MC for the event and organized the speakers. I spoke on a panel along with water purveyors from Monterey County, San Benito County, and the name of our panel was Balancing Water Resources and Food Safety in a Drought. As you many know, this is an issue I have a great interest in, the issue of balancing potential pathogens from environmental exposure on crops, balancing that management issue with the conservation goals. And so in my talk, I focused on the issues of the drought, but also touched on our recent statewide recycled water order that we issued in June, emphasizing the safety of the use of recycled water for agriculture. But I also strongly emphasized the importance of riparian corridor preservation and restoration as an important tool in our toolbox to manage the inputs of nitrate and nitrogen into our surface and groundwaters. So we had a good discussion. There's a great group, diverse. There was a panel after us of farmers of diverse farming operations in the Central Coast that provided some concrete ways that they're balancing food safety and conservation on their farms. And it's very inspiring to see people step up to the plate, be creative, and come up with solutions that meet multiple benefits. This is a lot of organizations are involved in putting on this event every August. UC Cooperative Extension, the counties, the agricultural commissioners, RCDs, NRCS, et cetera. So it's a great forum. I look forward to staying involved with that group and continue to work on that challenge as part of this board and working with stakeholders. On August 21st, Felicia Marcus and I met with the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission And we were discussing their financing strategies for their multiple benefit water resource planning. You know, I do want to highlight the PUC of San Francisco and recent work they're doing to really elevate issues like groundwater management within their service area, as well as their watershed management, green infrastructure ideas, moving the needle on those issues to for the principal purpose of reducing combined sewer overflows, but coming up with standard engineering plans that can be used statewide to really further low impact development. So, and also just their bread and butter, wastewater and water enterprises, and integrating these issues. So, and then interestingly, then August 29th, I met with Santa Clara Valley Water District folks. They convened a meeting of agencies that deal with mostly their permitting issues, whether it be flood control related or water supply or some of the ecosystem restoration work that Santa Clara Valley Water District does. So they're gathering input for the multiple agencies on their initiative to develop an integrated water resources master plan, they're calling it. But I just noted a lot of similarities to their effort at Santa Clara and San Francisco. And I know this is going on statewide, but I just want to emphasize this recent encounter, because when we talk about financing, part of the confidence of the state in taking the risk to do the financing is the confidence in the governance approach. And the governance approach in these areas, it also, we see this in other parts of the state, but it's integrating these aspects. So in the delivery of projects, we're getting co-benefits, and the ratepayer is getting more bang for the buck through these integrated governance structures. And the numbers pencil that out as we get into the details. So I just want to emphasize those meetings. I think it's a sign of the times. Drought has forced us to really be more creative in terms of looking at co-benefit opportunities. And so I just want to highlight those meetings that we participated in. You know, at the Santa Clara meeting, we had Region 3 Executive Officer, Region 2 Assistant Executive Officer, as well as the NIMFS folks, Fish and Wildlife, and the Corps of Engineers. So we were looking at coordinating permitting functions, but also realizing multiple benefits for water supply, flood control, and ecosystem protection. Before I finish, I want to emphasize or highlight an upcoming event, the Water Quality Coordinating Committee, that Fran Spivey-Weber heads up. That's October 1st to 3rd. And that's when all the regional boards gather with the state board members and discuss various issues coming up. I'm sure Fran will talk more about it. This year I'm co-leading a field trip with Fran of rainwater harvesting, stormwater capture, installations here in the Sacramento area, as well as some groundwater management evolution that's going on here that's really increasing the coordination. So we'll emphasize that. And then on Friday the 3rd of October, I'm co-leading a session on wetland restoration with San Diego Regional Board Chair Henry Barbanel. And so we look forward to that. And that's all my report. Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you. Well, I've just returned from vacation, so
How was it?
was wonderful, and I was surrounded by so much water. I didn't know quite what to do, being from California during this drought. But before I left on vacation, I did pay a visit to West Valley Water District in the city of Rialto. And for those of you who've been around for a while, and Tom will remember this, there was a time when the state board was poised to conduct hearings in Rialto regarding the closed wells down there due to perchlorate contamination. And I was the designated hearing officer for that event. So it was somewhat of a major milestone and a major, I think, accomplishment for me to visit. Accomplishment by the Water District for me to make this visit a week and a half ago and see what they've done. West Valley Water District was one of the districts that did not participate in the litigation, but instead chose to try to build partnership and develop a solution for the chlorate contamination that closed down so many of the drinking water wells in the city of Rialto. And these wells, the contaminations were first detected in 1998, I believe. And starting the fall of this year, hopefully, if all the permits and everything worked out, they will have online a 3 million gallons per day plant using biological fluidized bed reactors to treat the contaminated water for both nitrates as well as perchlorate down to below MCL level, and have it, part of their water supply system. So it's an amazing accomplishment for them in partnership with, obviously, the city as well as SAWPA. They also received funding from us and from the Department of Public Health for the drinking water program at the time, and well as the feds. But it does show what can be done.
Art of the possible.
Yes, when you work with others to try to develop solutions that actually deliver actual cleanup action that results in water, rather than, with all due respect to all the attorneys, rather than engaging in various litigations over the years. So my hat's off to West Valley Water District.
That's great.
At the last board meeting, I arrived late because I was speaking at the opening of the California Adaptation Conference, which was the first conference that California had held on this topic. Not the first conference held nationally, but the first one for California. And it was, I think there were like 1,500 people there. It was quite well attended. And one of the most interesting things that came from that was a presentation from Ken Alex, who heads up the Office of Planning and Research for the governor's office. And the governor's office and the Office of Planning and Research are working on new guidelines for general plans. And as many of you will know, general plans currently have water issues as an option, not as a part of the general plan. So that's something to watch and to participate in, particularly for people who are living in communities that have more access to general plan information and general plan guidance than we do. But it's a huge opportunity, and climate is one of the motivating factors for this change. Secondly, I spoke with the Torrance South Bay COG and on drought, and I live in the South Bay, and this is the first time ever. I've been on the board for 8 years. It's the first time ever I have been invited to do anything in the South Bay except working with recycled water with the West Basin. So it was quite an honor. I was very pleased and glad, but it took the drought for them to figure out that I was there. So I'm pleased. I'm very pleased.
I know, you've spent more time in the Inland Empire.
Oh, much more.
Total regular
Oh,
there.
yeah, and in LA and all kinds of places, but never in my neighborhood. Thirdly, I spoke at a Whittier Law School in Costa Mesa event about enforcement. And this was because of a grant, I believe, that was given by Cali, PA, for 2 nonprofit organizations. This was the Coast Keeper working with Whittier Law School. And so you had a lot of young professionals as well as students who are looking at enforcement as a future or current activity, but also the students are engaging with the Coast Keeper in doing research. And so they had done some research, interestingly, on the median strips that are outside people's homes. You have the sidewalk, and then right across is this little bitty strip that has sometimes grass on it, that's where a lot of the runoff is for drought concerns. And they were looking at the laws of the various communities in Orange County that restricted what people could do with those median strips. Now, most of them you can convert them to something else that isn't grass. But there were a handful where grass was required, or you were required to look like your neighbor. Whatever your neighbor had, you were supposed to have that too. And so they are...
Even those funny statues and stuff?
Well, they could. I guess, you know, if you took it to court, probably. And so they're going sort of community by community to work on changing those statutes so that and they are setting up, this is the coastkeeper, are setting up a set of options on median strips that people can come and look at and figure out what to do. So it was very uplifting. Thank you.
Cool.
So I'll just I'd start by saying I have quite a few things that have piled up because I did a lot of traveling over the summer. I try and travel during summer vacation when I don't have to keep track of my son so much. So I'll just be bringing up things here and there because it was quite a bit of traveling. But I'll piggyback on Board Member Dodek's comments about West Valley Water District. I was there as well, and the only thing that I would add is just how involved the community is in that project. And it was really exciting to go to a place where the room was filled with board members, the mayor was there, Chamber of Commerce was there, and this is just something that's very important to them and that they're very proud of. Exciting project. It'll be good to see, you know, once it's up and running. Over the last couple of weeks, I traveled, went to Zone 7 and met with their general manager and staff. This is an area in Alameda County that serves about 200,000 people and is heavily reliant on state water project water. And so interesting to see how they've dealt with the challenge. And they were targeting 25% conservation. And this is, I believe, you know, from 2013, and they have hit that mark. So very active in the community with, you know, changing over lawns and other items, very standard stuff, but just very active in the community. And it seems to me that because they serve multiple purposes in Zone 7, they're also the flood control district. They do groundwater management. They have sort of their own IRWM. So, you know, conservation, of course, fits in nicely. So good to see all of the progress there, but also, of course, they're very concerned about next year because of their reliance on the State Water Project. I traveled to Semi-Tropic Water District, which is part of the you know, Kern Water Bank in Kern County. Actually, they're located in Wasco, and met with their a number of their board members. Took a tour. Actually, they also being very reliant on the State Water Project. Part of the tour included a flyover of Bolden Island in the Delta. So they have a lease on Bolden Island, and they were intending on transferring water off of Bolden Island over to store in their water bank. And unfortunately for them, they got hit by curtailments. So they were not able to utilize the benefit of that lease. But it was interesting to, you know, get their perspective on curtailments. My sense is that, you know, they understood what we did and why. You know, it didn't end up working out for them this year, but I think they're going to try again. They talked a lot about the concern about us moving forward on implementation of groundwater legislation. So it was a good opportunity for them to spend some time directly with a board member, and I did what I could to assure them that, you know, that we're definitely assuming that the bill gets signed. This is something that needs to be dealt with locally, and they very obviously have the tools to deal with things locally. So a good conversation there. And then I also went on the same tour that board member Marcus went on a few weeks ago in the Delta, met with farmers in the Delta to hear from them regarding, you know, their concern about curtailments and their perspective of the issue. So interesting to see the delta issues from two different perspectives. Of course, semi-tropic, wanting to move water out of the delta, and they, had curtailments. And then some of the farmers that I met with that, have pre-1914 rights. And Bolden would be post-1914. So there was a little difference there in terms of the curtailments.
Interesting. I'd love to talk to you about I'd like to go down to Kern and the variety of water banks down there and understand them. I actually haven't spent enough time down there. That's sort of high on my list of next things to do. Well, thanks. I've been more Sacramento bound, either through drought meetings or end of session work, both on the water bonds and on the water bond and on groundwater, and just an interesting mix of people and that usual end of session or near end of session deadline with the water bond pacing, which in some cases brings out the better angels of some people's nature and not so much in others. But we ended up with a good result, I think, and some, if it passes, some real tools, I think, to work with people. And I think particularly in the water bond, as well as the shaping of the locals first format of the groundwater bill, a number of tools to lessen some of the disputes that so much of water is fraught with. I mean, I think we'll have a lot of tools to help do some win-wins with people in a way that can really move the dialogue on water forward to the real all-of-the-above strategy that I think we all know we're going to need to take in the face of population growth and climate change, and being aware of the fact that food security is going to be an increasing issue, maybe not for California, but for the world. So I left it on an optimistic, if tired note at the end of session. I also had some conversations that maybe some of you have had that I want to toss into the mix for our stormwater strategy, and I'll try and find the right experts. Just in a number of meetings and conversations I've been a part of, I've had conversations with people about what's happening, particularly on the East Coast, with DC and Philadelphia approaches, where they're using innovative financing tools to try and incentivize landowners to do stormwater capture, and actually finding a way to pay them to do it. So you end up with like a distributed system of it. And it's a little different than what we've been talking about, but some very innovative financing tools. So I'm going to try and find some folks for our team to sit down and talk to, and I think we should have a portion of exploration of that in our stormwater strategy. So I just thought I would lob that into the mix. I could, if I had another cup of coffee, I could explain it a little bit better, but there's just some intriguing ideas that we haven't been talking about as much here. I don't know that they fit in as much in a separated system world, but I think it's worth looking at what's happening in other parts of the country and seeing if there's anything we can adapt, learn, or just toss into the toolbox. And there may be some of you out there in the room or listening who know a lot about this, so contact me if so. Sorry, I'm looking at Mr. Stormwater over there. I don't know if you know finance too, as well as engineering. But I was intrigued by it. It just seemed like a few other avenues to figure out how to incentivize the kind of transformation that we've been talking about, which is the ultimate win-win, win-win, win. Can you count the wins? All right. With that, we're about to move into the agenda items on the agenda. I forgot to say generally what the pacing of the meeting will be. We don't have a massive number of items on the agenda. We have some items that may take some time. So we will take some sort of a mid-morning break, maybe a little bit later in the morning, and then we may go a little bit later into the lunch hour if we think we can finish. Otherwise, we will take a lunch break. So with that, we have three items that are listed as uncontested on the agenda. Are they still uncontested?
We have one comment card for item 4.
Okay. So why don't we take item 3 and item 5? Do we have a motion?
Move adoption of item 3 and 5.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Passes. Let's go to item number 4. Z, are you going to present?
Item 4 is a basin plan issue, amendments to the water quality control plan for the Tulare Lake Basin. I see Ken Landau is here with us, the Assistant Executive Officer of the Regional Board. And by the way, Mr. Landau is retiring in November, so this might be your last opportunity to see him before you.
Wow.
Actually, Betty Yee will, our basin planning person, will make the staff presentation.
Great.
And we also have our attorney, David Coop, with us. Good morning, Chair Marcus and members of the board. My name is Betty Yee. I'm the Basin Plan Coordinator for the Central Valley region, and I'm from the Rancho Cordova office. This item is to consider a proposed resolution approving amendments to the Water Quality Control Plan for Tulare Lake Basin to edit and update language that was adopted by the Central Valley Board in March of this year. Let's see this. Is this better? Oh.
See, told you. That's why they clipped this thing to my lapel. I can't do it.
The Central Valley Water Board amended its basin plan to make a minor correction to the boundary between the San Joaquin River Basin and the Tulare Lake Basin, correct a footnote and make other language corrections, and update references to the Department of Public Health, Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Department of Resources, Recycling, and Recovery. And the Central Valley Water Board also amended its basin plan to update the waiver language to remove waivers that had sunsetted and to add explanatory language that referred to Water Code Section 13269. The Central Valley Water Board also took this opportunity to incorporate all of the state board policies that had been adopted or updated since the last time the regional board had updated this basin plan. This slide lists all of the policies that were incorporated. In the amendments incorporating these policies, the Central Valley Water Board also specified that future revisions to these policies would also be incorporated. The State Water Board received comments from these three organizations. The comments received from Best and Krieger and Paramount Farming were duplicates of comments previously submitted to the Regional Water Board. The Tule Basin Water Quality Coalition did not provide comments during the Central Valley Water Board process, but their comments are similar to the comments of the other two entities. As I said, all the comments were previously submitted to the Central Valley Water Board, and they were submitted verbatim to the State Water Board. The commenters did not explain why they believed that the regional board's responses were inadequate, but explained that these comments were being sent to the State Water Board because the Central Valley Water Board did not make the suggested changes. The response to comments document included with your agenda package contains the staff response to all the comments. The prevailing comment was a request that the State Water Board strike the phrase, including future revisions, which the Central Valley Water Board included with incorporation in the State Water Board's policies. The commenters were concerned that the inclusion of this language would allow the Central Valley Water Board to revise these policies without public notice, review, or hearing. Regional water boards incorporate State Water Board policies into their basin plans for completeness. The regional water boards do not have discretion to revise these policies. So the Central Valley Water Board's response was that it is appropriate for the Central Valley Water Board to incorporate these policies, including the future revisions, because the State Water Board adopts these plans and policies after technical, environmental, and public review. The time for stakeholder input is when the State Water Board is considering these plans and policies, and not when the regional board is incorporating these into the basin plan. The State Water Board's response supports the Central Valley Water Board's response and adds that the prospective incorporation of the State Water Board's policies efficiently informs stakeholders that these plans and policies are in effect without diverting regional board staff to revisit the basin plan every time a State Water Board plan or policy is amended. Staff recommends that the board adopt a resolution which will approve the amendments. At this time, I would like to enter into the record comments, responses to comments, the resolution, and my presentation. I'll be pleased to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, or want to hear from Mr. Thomas first?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had a question for council actually on this. You know, the issue of perspective, of having perspective language for a change in a state board policy within a basin plan in a regional board. And this is obviously something you looked at. There's clear benefit in terms of, you know, having done basin planning myself, there's a clear benefit administratively to doing this. And what were some of the legal issues, and in the end, your conclusion on prospectively anticipating changes in state board policy within the basin plan of a regional board?
Sure. Phil Wiles, Assistant Chief Counsel for the board. You know, in essence, the water code authorizes the state board to adopt state policy for water quality control. It also provides that once adopted and effective, all state agencies shall comply with those policies for water quality control. So I view this really as essentially incorporating by reference the future changes to the policy that the regional boards will have to comply with in any case. And so I don't have a problem with it in terms of the regional board's authority to do it. It certainly is sort of a time-saving mechanism to avoid having to come back and revise their basin plan amendment to incorporate policies as they are revised by the state board. You know, if there's a specific policy that somebody thinks shouldn't, because of the way that the policy is actually framed, that it doesn't make sense to incorporate it, that's a conversation we could have. But it's quite traditional for the regional boards over time to amend their basin plans to incorporate the revisions. This is just a more efficient way of doing so, in my view. And it also does help to, I think, educate people who read the water quality control plans that they should understand that the state board policies are not static. They are, in fact, dynamic, and they are revised from time to time.
So as soon as we adopt a new policy, is it in essence incorporated by reference into whatever gets done at the regional board level, because we've already made that the policy? So let's say they hadn't already gone through the process of revising their basin plan, but they were doing a permit, that there was something in our state plan that would control, it would control, whether they had updated their basin plan or not.
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
It would be binding on the regional boards whether or not they've revised their basin plans. And so, again, this really doesn't change the effect of the future revisions to state policy with respect to the regional boards. I've never seen a situation where a regional board had a credible basis for saying, as other agencies may, under the water code, for saying that they don't have the obligation to comply with the state policy for water quality control.
Is there let's say then that somebody, I'm thinking about what the practical implications of it are. So if you were then incorporate, I'm trying to figure out if there is any difference. There wouldn't necessarily be a difference in terms of the regional board then doing something that would have an impact on whether it's a discharger or whoever else based on what was in or out of their basin plan, whether it was in our plan or already incorporated in theirs. Whatever they did, the person would have an appeal from that actual permitting decision or action, right?
Generally speaking, yes. It depends on the nature of the regional board's action to go ahead and implement the state policy. If it's adjudicative, like issuing a permit that follows direction in a state policy for water quality control, then absolutely yes, that permit would be subject to petition and review by the state water board. In some cases, the state board policies direct regions to do things that are more quasi-legislative, and so the regional board, the same regional board, just followed the state water board's on-site wastewater treatment system policy and amended its plan. That was a legislative action, so that wouldn't be subject to petition, but it's subject to the state board's approval, which you just gave it on the uncontested calendar. And so some of the policies are a little bit different in that respect. But yes, the short answer is the effect is the same whether or not they've incorporated the future revisions. And in almost all cases, there's an opportunity for somebody to ask the state board to weigh in when they are, in fact, taking an action to apply the state policy.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. How do other regional boards handle this issue? Similar to what Region 5 is proposing here?
Actually, in my experience, this is a novel approach. It may be Central Valley Board can confirm this.
This actually came about from the regional boards doing the incorporation of the odds policy. All of the, I believe all of the regional boards are using the same language to do the incorporation. So every single basin plan will eventually have at least this language for their odds policy incorporation. And since we were doing this update to add the other state board policies that we had not previously added into this basin plan, we went ahead and added that language for all of them.
Okay.
And then-
I would say, just to answer a little bit more, I think historically the practice has been when staff have time, they will eventually propose regional
They
water
do a
quality control
roll-up.
plan updates. It's a very, very low priority, and one of the reasons it's a low priority is because the policies are effective
It's already
anyway.
effective. Yeah, and then wondering if Region 5 could comment on this. Just as a practical matter, since the policy, once the state board adopts, the policy is already in effect, what sort of stakeholder processes, I mean, I understand that there are some stakeholders that oppose this approach, but as far as the actual reference in your basin plan, there's nothing that can be done anyway, correct? So if a stakeholder doesn't like the policy, their opportunity would have been to comment before the state board. So is there any stakeholder process benefit to having this discussion just simply by way of providing information, or it's just a reference that just providing information as far as any changes that the state board may have adopted?
This is Ken Landau, Assistant Executive Officer with Central Valley Region. Much of this, again, these policies are all in force as they exist now, and any changes that the state board makes will also be enforced. The biggest thing this does is it makes the basin plan a more complete document. We have references to all sorts of other laws in Clean Water Act and all sorts of things in there, so that if you're looking at what's affecting groundwater in the Central Valley region, well, certainly the regional board actions are, but also there are any number of state water board actions, anti-degradation policies, another thing, cleanup policies. And if we didn't have this type of reference in our basin plan, that doesn't make those policies non-existent, but it means that when you read our basin plan, you then have to know that you also need to go to the state board's website and DTSC's website and these various other things. It's not necessarily up to date, as has been said. We do this periodically when enough things, enough agency names are out of date, enough code sections have changed. It's just sort of a routine housekeeping issue. And particularly, we like to get rid of things that are wrong. Agency names or references to state board policies that have been amended or changed. So again, we're seeing it literally as a housekeeping issue. If somebody came to us and said they didn't like the state board policy, we shouldn't follow it, and we issued a permit or something based upon what we thought we should do because we hadn't incorporated it in the basin plan, I expect when it got petitioned to the state board, you would tell us it didn't matter what we thought, it's the state policy and we should do it. So we don't think we have discretion to follow these things, and so it's non-discretion. We don't have to put them in our basin plan, but we think there's is a public benefit to that, letting people know what exists when they're
In one place.
looking.
All right. Well, let's hear from Mr. Thomas.
Thank you. Bill Thomas, South San Joaquin Water Quality Coalition. We really wanted to get this on the agenda so Betty could come make a presentation to you. I tell you, we're more troubled about Ken's retirement than we're troubled about the basin plan amendments. We regard the basin plans as the document that sets the rules of the road. all the engineers, district managers, coalition folks, attorneys have the water code and your basin plan. What we're talking here is not challenging any of the legal principles that Phil laid out. It's the sanctity and the importance of your basin plan as a guide document. This proposal you won't hear from us again because we're incorporating in 2014 any changes we make in the future. No longer is the second step going to take place. First step is you develop a policy here. And then the basins, the regions, dealing with their basin plans, then will periodically update, and hopefully timely, update the basin plans. Now that updating's not going to happen because they don't have to. Staff is shortcutting a novel way to take the second step out. Our concern isn't over the legal importance. It's the utility of the basin plan as the important guide document. It's going to fall out of currency and reduces the basin plan importance. It will lead to some confusion, some inability to give cogent advice. You know, don't think of this as only important between your policies and the regions. The importance is how those guides, the state codes, your basin plans, you know, are an application in the field. We just think this is an unnecessary, perhaps somewhat time-saving, but an unnecessary removal of the second step that's going to have negative implications down the road, because these basin plans are going to become less and less important, because I don't think the regions are going to any longer be bothered with taking your policies and putting them in the basin plans, because they're being authorized not to care, not to do that. That's our concern. It's not a legal concern. It's a process concern.
Let me ask a process question then, and I have a question for you all in terms of what would happen in practice. Is your concern that the document itself won't be updated with references, or the process of having a hearing there and then having to have a hearing here?
Well,
Because I can see as a lawyer, you have to figure out which apply to create a whole document to figure out how to counsel your employees. But the question is, having to do the hearing and the process does take an awful lot of time.
We're probably concerned on both levels. Certainly the basin plan continuity, but also when you do a policy, when the board does a policy here, it's often generic. We participate here. It's not a question of not participating. When you do a policy here, it has general applications. And very seldom are we talking about nuances of how something might apply. We get to that level when we're talking with the individual regions. So there's some concern on that as well, but mostly I'm worried that all of a sudden we have to say, beware, basin plans are no longer going to be adopted, because in 2014 they authorized themselves not to have to do that because they've incorporated anything that may future happen. That's our concern.
So the question that I had of Region 5 staff, maybe I didn't articulate it quite well, but in terms of a stakeholder process, so just take any policy, the OTS policy, for example. What's the difference in practical terms as far as stakeholder input, discussion, value in getting information out, if it's incorporated by reference versus if the regional board adopts?
Well, if the regional board adopts, we certainly get the opportunity to go through the process, of interacting with them about how a policy, might apply, that we would not have here. And so that's going to, be lost. But that was step one of Felicia's bifurcating the question. My bigger concern is all of a sudden the basin plans, are going to be a lot less important. And we have to advise our people, beware. You not only have to have the basin plans, you've got to some way start compiling a drawer of all state board policies, because it's never going to be incorporated back into the basin plans. It's certainly a difference in the processes we've enjoyed. We're concerned about it, but we understand the convenience of it from the regional board. Thank you.
Can you guys explain, are you proposing that you wouldn't change the basin plan to incorporate this stuff by reference so that people could see it? Or are people on their own to try and keep track of what we're doing at the state board?
Well, I suppose if we weren't doing this at all, we wouldn't have to list any of this stuff. No, what we're proposing is that for an existing policy that is already incorporated into our basin plan,
Yeah.
if the state board changes it, that change will be reflected into our basin plan. For a new policy, like the OTS policy, for the trash policy coming up, any policy that actually affects Region 5, this does not automatically bring those into our basin plan. We would still, the next time we are doing a edit and cleanup, we would incorporate those policies at that time. So the concern that there will be a time lag, certainly, again, taking the trash policy, for example, from the time the state board adopts it to the time it would be incorporated into our basin plan. There will be a lag of months or years, depending on when we get to the edits and updates of our basin plan. Because I'm assuming we probably don't have to, that I'm assuming it will be in effect for Region 5, whether we have it in or not. But the language that we've put in for prospective updates does not incorporate new policies. It only would incorporate updates of existing policies. So,
Don't you think that does create a bit of a confusion when people are trying to figure out what the policies are, unless you had big declaratory language pointing to a website that had all the applicable state board policies that come afterwards?
So let me see if I can try.
I mean, we clearly have a failure to communicate to begin with here.
Ken, tell me if I'm misinterpreting this, but I think what it really says is that if in the basin plan it says that state board adopted such and such a policy for on September 9th, 2014. Mm-hmm. And then a year later, they amend it to change a word. It goes back and says that amendment it's not just the one they adopted in 2014, but it's the amended one that that is applicable. Because otherwise, it is a little confusing. You go look at their basin plan, it says, oh, well, we have this statewide policy that was adopted in 2014. It doesn't say anything about the one that was adopted in 2015, so that one maybe doesn't apply, or maybe it does apply. This just says that the new updates apply.
No, but I mean, what I'm hearing is that you're kind of on your own for the new ones that would come after 2014.
No, because this
that
doesn't,
aren't related to existing ones.
this doesn't affect those at all.
But
this-
wait, that you're on your own because it's not going to be incorporated into the new basin plan, you have to know to go to the state board plans and the basin plan.
And that's
I
been the
think,
case for
for the interim.
forever. We've always had that problem because the basin plans don't automatically get changed.
Right, no,
we're not-
hear me here, because there is there's a separate point in here that's not completely clear. There's always been this lag time, and so I opened with this question to try and illuminate it. The state board plans do apply. What I hear now is being proposed seems totally logical from a legal standpoint, that all future ones are incorporated by reference. So it's all future changes to existing policies are incorporated. You're just being clear that they're incorporated until such time as we update the plan?
Yes.
So you're actually giving more information?
That's what we're trying to do, yes.
Well, that wasn't clear. Why is that bit? I mean, I think we need language to make absolutely clear that you will be updating the basin plans to incorporate new policies and updates to policies as you can, and in the interim, they nonetheless apply, to help tell people that they nonetheless apply. So what you're trying to do is actually an improvement over the existing situation, which has not been clear until this moment. So I actually think we're going to need some language to make that abundantly clear, and I also find it odd that in all this process you haven't been able to just talk to Mr. Thomas and make this clear.
So
Or to me, because I've asked about this.
If I can, the current structure of this basin plan is it identifies by name with a short description each of the existing state policies and plans. And so the proposed amendments to the water quality control plan are for each one of those paragraphs to say we are also incorporating future revisions to this specific policy or this specific plan. And so I think it actually is pretty clear from the amendment that's before the state board that this notion of future revisions to incorporate plans and policies that haven't even been conceived of yet doesn't apply to those plans and policies unless they're specifically identified in the regional board water quality control plan, and the only way they're specifically identified is if the state board has already adopted them. So it really is, I think, now it doesn't, I don't believe it says, but you could correct me because this isn't part of the amendment language, whether or not it says that we will endeavor to provide a reference to future as yet unadopted policies and plans.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm
Okay.
just saying we're having conversation about totally different things here.
That may be, or it may just be a distinction about whether it's a good idea to provide the sentence that says, by the way, this policy or plan that we're referencing may be revised in the future. You shouldn't just take our word for the
Right,
description.
and that's a good sentiment to have, because that way you don't have to do this cross-referencing. But what I'm picked up from the comments, as well as Mr. Thomas's comments, is a and even from the original presentation, because you were talking about efficiency,